It's funny how that always happens.
Yeah, it's funny.
With BMO Harris, you don't need your wallet. You can get money from any BMO ATM using your phone.
Uh-oh, looks like someone can buy their own tacos.
Okay.
You could also pay them back with Zelle.
So many ways for you to pay.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not hungry. I'll just have some of yours.
Order for BMO.
Ooh, tacos, banking. Some things are made to be mobile.
That feeling you get when your phone is your wallet. That's the BMO effect.
Watch me. Here I stand on my own 2 feet. Jump shot intact. Here to compete. Skilled hands were there to mend the bone. From loving halls that brought me home. My world stopped with a drive through the lane. Now give me the ball. You'll remember my name. Watch me. Orthopedic excellence at Shriners Children's. The most amazing care anywhere.
Allbank has been serving the Chicago business community for over 70 years and is a proud sponsor of Chicago Tonight on WTTW. Allbank, Chicago's concierge business bank. 4 locations and online at allbank.com.
A matinee at Chicago's most extravagant theater ended in the deadliest building fire in American history. And then,
Monday, April 13th, 1992 will long be remembered by Chicagoans as the day of the Great Loop Underground Flood.
This is a very serious problem. Don't make it funny.
downtown disasters on Chicago Stories on WTTW.
Hi, I'm Raphael, and I watch WTTW.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman will join us in a moment. On the show tonight, new details on the controversy over the Lightfoot campaign's email to educators.
This is really a place of inspiration.
Bronzeville is now a National Heritage Area, what that means for lifelong residents. Chinatown celebrates the Lunar New Year ahead of this weekend's parade. We hear about safety precautions and laying out the best approaches to treating mental health in the city.
In Paris, as I mentioned, I am in Bronzeville, where I'll be co-anchoring tonight as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. And Bronzeville is a neighborhood that's getting some national attention as it is now a National Heritage Area. Residents here are hoping that this years-long effort will bring some tourism and some economic development to the community. We'll tell you all about it in just a few minutes.
Thanks, Brandis. And now to some of today's top stories. Yes, there was just an election in November, but guess what? Early voting is now underway. This is for the Chicago municipal election, of course, featuring 9 candidates for mayor and dozens of city council candidates. So where can a voter go now? Well, there are 2 places open in the loop, the super site at 191 North Clark and the election board offices at 68 West Washington. Starting February 13th, voters will be able to go to a location in all 50 wards. That'll run through Election Day on February 28th. A group of Southside residents wants to stop the attacks on postal workers. The group is made up of pastors and postal union members who talked about setting up a warning system to prevent attacks on workers delivering the mail. The attacks have become commonplace in recent months as antagonizers go after mail, packages, and universal mailbox keys. The group is urging local officials to take action, but also saying that each individual resident also has a role to play.
Come out on the porch, tie a ribbon on your door handle, on the gate, or anything so they can know that's a safe haven for them if something go on in the community and that someone is watching.
Illinois Attorney General argues that a portion of the controversial Safety Act should be reinstated. Just before the new year, a Kankakee County judge struck down the portion of the law that eliminates cash bail, saying it violated the state constitution. Raul filed a 167-page brief today before the Illinois Supreme Court, calling that ruling, quote, flawed, and he says the Constitution does not require the state to have a system of monetary bail. The Supreme Court is slated to hold oral hearings on the case in March. And up next, Heather Sharon with an update to her story about Lightfoot campaign emails to CPS teachers. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
New details in a story WTTW News first broke earlier this month. WTTW has obtained records revealing Chicago Public Schools officials put the brakes on the Lightfoot campaign's emails that asked for CPS student volunteers. Those emails reveal CPS officials immediately told Mayor Lori Lightfoot's campaign the messages were inappropriate, which contradicts what Lightfoot said on the matter. And WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with the latest based on those documents obtained today through a Freedom of Information records request. Heather, so you broke this story a few weeks ago. We learned more today from these new emails after the mayor's deputy campaign manager sent the original emails looking for volunteers to, quote, help her win her campaign. So what do we know now?
Well, we know at least 168 teachers got these emails starting at about 8:30 in the morning from Megan Crane, the Lightfoot's deputy campaign manager. Now, a lot of teachers had a lot of questions, and they sent these emails asking what they were supposed to do to district officials. That brought an immediate response from district officials who got in touch with Megan Crane just before 1 p.m. and they told her to stop sending the emails and that they were in violation of the district's ethics policy and the city's government ethics ordinance.
And it appears this happened right away, Megan Crane being the deputy on the Lightfoot campaign. So it raises some questions about what the mayor and her staff knew. Take us through the timeline.
Well, that first conversation happened just before 1 p.m. By 3:30, Chuck Swirsky, the senior advisor to CEO Pedro Martinez, had memorialized that conversation in an email he sent to his colleagues, including the CPS ethics officer. Now, just before 3 p.m. was when I reached out to the Lightfoot campaign asking about these emails and asking if they were concerned that it was an ethics violation. It was at 5 p.m. that the Lightfoot campaign sent me an email statement defending these emails, saying they were a common practice designed to keep students involved in the city's civic life, even though almost 6 hours ago at that point, they had been informed that the emails were inappropriate. It wasn't until 7 p.m. that they stopped the emails in total and said they were inappropriate.
All right, viewers, you got to keep track of all that. And we should mention Chuck Swirsky, not the Bulls play-by-play guy, but a different Chuck Swirsky who works in CPS. So, as you mentioned, the mayor said she stopped those emails as soon as you reached out. Has she talked about the contradiction here?
I asked the mayor's campaign that question, and they declined to respond in detail to my question. They have said that these emails were a mistake and that the mayor put a stop to them. However, if they were informed at 1 p.m. on January 11th that the emails were inappropriate and did not stop them until 7 p.m., that certainly raises questions about how immediate the mayor's action was.
All right, Heather Sharon continuing to follow this story. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. A South Side neighborhood is getting $10 to $15 million to ensure it continues to tell the story of the Great Migration during the early 1900s. The Black Metropolis National Heritage Area stretches from the South Loop to Woodlawn and is home to natural, historic, and cultural resources that tell the story of that time period. Brandis and producer Blair Paddock are in Bronzeville tonight for this week's edition of Chicago Tonight in your neighborhood. Not quite the weekend yet. Brandis, tell us first of all what part of the neighborhood you're in right now.
Yeah, so Paris, I'm at the intersection of 35th and King Drive. Obviously, I've got the famous Victory Monument behind me, and I'll tell you more about that in just a little bit. But we're near a lot of businesses, schools, offices, and that is really reflective of what Bronzeville has historically meant to the black community. They created their own businesses, schools, offices here because they had to. And what's more, we are now surrounded by what is called the brand new Bronzeville Black Metropolis National Heritage Area. And it tells the story, as you said, of the Great Migration, when more than 500,000 black Americans fled the dangers of the Jim Crow South and they settled right here in Chicago. If the walls inside this building could talk, they might tell the histories of some of Bronzeville's greatest former residents.
Gwendolyn Brooks. Quincy Jones and John H. Johnson.
The massive block-long Rosenwald Court Apartments opened in 1929 to provide modern housing for African Americans moving to Chicago during the Great Migration.
Lorraine Hansberry actually supposed to have written A Raisin in the Sun while she was living here.
But another part of the building's history, its disrepair and eventual abandonment by the year 2000.
At one time, this building had a bad reputation, and it ended up being closed. But they didn't want to tear it down.
Watika Kleinpeter is a lifelong Bronzeville resident and has lived in the newer, remodeled Rosenwald apartments for the last 7 years.
I'm glad that it's being recognized. It's historic. It's over 100 years old.
It was reopened in 2016 after a massive redevelopment and preservation effort. The building is just one of at least 20 that tell the history of Bronzeville, a welcoming center to blacks fleeing racism in the South and a mecca for black business and artistry, a history that some say is finally being recognized and preserved.
When we began this journey, they told us that it was going to be a marathon and not a sprint, and that's exactly what it has been.
Paula Robinson, president of the Black Metropolis National Heritage Area, says long-running efforts to preserve the community have finally come to fruition. In late December, President Joe Biden signed the National Heritage Act, establishing the Bronzeville Black Metropolis National Heritage Area. It means up to $1 million a year for the next 15 years. Now, local preservationists are tasked with developing a management plan to properly preserve sites and prep them for tourists.
I'm talking about international tourism. People come here for the gospel music, people come here for the blues, people come here for the jazz, and they come here to see the architecture and the stories.
And future visitors will have plenty to explore, with over 20 sites included in the plan, ranging from the Muddy Waters Home to the Ida B. Wells Monument and the B branch of the Chicago Public Library. The area being designated is significant in size, too, stretching from 18th Street down to 71st. Robinson hopes reflecting on this past can provide lessons for innovation.
We have people here who were innovators and did the first open heart surgery, who created franchises like the Negro League. So necessity forced them to innovate. We're key in building on that sense of necessity, innovation, because we find we need it again now.
Among Bronzeville's innovators of today is artist Frances Guichard, who works under the name Marlene Campbell to tell the stories of history, like in this piece titled The Great Migration, The Ancestors.
It's usually all about the ancestors who come back to tell us to be more socially, economically, and environmentally responsible, so we'll have something to leave to the next generation.
She and her husband Andre run Gallery Guichard and are residents at the Bronzeville Artists Lofts, one of the sites included in the heritage area, whose walls have their own stories to tell.
The Bronzeville Artists Loft actually used to be the Ben Franklin store, the first African-American department store in the country, owned by the Jones brothers.
You can't walk anywhere in Bronzeville without gleaning or reaping some history that was amazing throughout our culture.
And also significant about this location, as I mentioned, we're right by the Victory Monument. It was built in honor of the black soldiers who fought during World War I, specifically in the 370th Infantry of the 93rd Division. Now, Bronzeville was also home to another major, though he was not in the Army, John Adams, founder of the Bronzeville Trail Task Force. He is here now to tell us more about that. Thank you for joining us in such chilly temperatures. We appreciate it.
Pleased to be here.
So first, tell us, if you would, about Marshall Taylor. He was nicknamed Major as a kid. Who did he go on to become?
He went on to become the first African American to win an international sports championship in any sport. And in this case, it was in cycling. He won a sprint race in Montreal in 1899.
Okay. And tell us about the congressional recognition that you all are looking for.
So we learned just 2 years ago, another U.S. cyclist, Greg LeMond, received the Congressional Gold Medal. And so as we began to research, the civic awards received by Marshal Major Taylor, we noticed that he had not received such award. Thus, our organization, the Bronzeville Trail Task Force, Inc., passed a resolution advocating for Marshal Major Taylor to receive the Congressional Gold Medal.
And tell us a little bit about the mission of the Bronzeville Trail Task Force.
So our mission is to repurpose the abandoned Kenwood L line that runs east to west, essentially down 40th Street. The line is the remnants of the historic Stockyard line, and it was elevated to an embankment back in the 1907 or so. And since that time, it operated as a commercial, industrial, and passenger line. And it finished being a passenger line in 1957.
Okay. All
It's
right.
been abandoned ever since.
Okay, so you're still working on that. John Adams, Bronzeville Trail Task Force, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Pleased to be here.
And of course, Paris will be back to wrap it up with you in just a bit.
All right, Brandon, stay warm out there. So much history in Bronzeville. Always learning something new every time we report on
Absolutely.
it. Thanks very much. And up next, celebrating the Lunar New Year amid increased security. But first, we take a look at the weather. The Lunar New Year parade is returning to Chinatown this weekend. The Chicago Police Department says it'll be on alert following the recent mass shooting in Monterey Park, California, that left 11 people dead. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez went to Chinatown to see how people are celebrating the Year of the Rabbit.
There is pride in the air.
Chúc mừng năm mới.
Wentworth Avenue is filled with traditional decorations in preparations for the Lunar New Year parade.
Everything is start from the beginning, and we wish for that the new year going to be different from the last year. So it's going to be like more wealthy, more health, more money.
Local alderwoman Nicole Lee says this year she'll be walking the parade.
This Lunar New Year especially is very exciting for me. I think it'll be a really wonderful feeling to be marching in the parade, in a parade that I've watched my entire life growing up in the community, and to be able to march in it as its representative is going to be amazing.
Businesses are hoping for a strong parade turnout for luck and wealth on the new year. Lee says a top priority has been putting together a security plan.
After talking to the police superintendent, the police commanders, and city services, we know that everybody's on heightened alert. We don't want anything to happen, but we absolutely have to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. And I think the best way for us to combat this sort of hate and gun violence is to gather together, to be together.
The community believes that reuniting with family is very important during Lunar New Year celebrations. Sandy Ruin from Project Vision, an organization catering to youth in the neighborhood, says during this time they focus on connecting students with their culture.
There's a lot of food, you know, and like lucky red envelopes, so it's like rewarding to see their eyes light up when they see, like, you know, the decorations, and we have a blessings tree, and just them wishing like blessings on their family, like prosperity, money, all their wishes coming true.
And it wouldn't be a Lunar New Year without the food. We have the dumplings, the shumai, and of course the noodles that signify longevity.
We can't forget the desserts.
It's a paste, it's a lotus paste, and then the outside is more flaky pastry.
We caught up with Vasila Dow on her way to share some celebratory desserts.
A huge thing in our culture is eating mooncake, for example. It's only eaten on holidays like Autumn Moon Festival, Lunar New Year. So yeah, it's pretty important to the celebration of this year.
If you're heading to the parade, be ready to watch dragon and lion dancing teams. Oh yeah, don't forget to keep an eye for the rabbit. For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
Happy Year of the Rabbit to everybody. And the Lunar Parade takes place this Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Up next, addressing concerns about access to mental health services. So please stay with us.
Where have we been? Where are we at? Where are we going?
essentially to be able to help anyone and everyone in the community, whether that's through academic support, social emotional learning, or just providing a safe space for youth to be able to be there.
This is the fabric of the neighborhood. You need to take care of the neighborhood. It's an ecosystem.
Mental health is emerging as a key issue in the campaign for mayor. Some of the candidates want to reopen shuttered city-run mental health clinics. Others say the better approach is to contract with local groups to help take care of the neediest Chicago residents. And joining us now to discuss best practices and the demand for mental health services are Alexa James, who leads NAMI Chicago, which advocates for and promotes community wellness and mental health support programs in the city and beyond, and Dr. Robert Schulman, Director of Clinical Services and the Acting Chair in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Rush University Medical College. Welcome both of you to Chicago Tonight. Alexa James, lay out for Chicagoans that perhaps are uninsured what mental health resources exist for them at this point.
Well, if you're uninsured, we need to get you insured because it's incredibly difficult. But we know that access, whether you're insured or not, is complicated. And really what people want to consume in terms of mental health services also depends. So there's clinical care, there's community-based care. But what insurance doesn't buy you is housing and other stability that we're really looking for. We have a huge crisis in access, whether you're uninsured or not. And we certainly see the need for the city to step in, as they have, to support people who are underinsured or uninsured.
Dr. Schulman, what's the best solution here to this access problem, given the needs of the city, given the fact that the pandemic has exacerbated those needs?
There's no easy answer. Part of it is demand exceeds supply of providers. And the second part of it is that our modes of treatment can be thought of as sort of inefficient, that we can actually innovate our models of care to treat a greater number of people.
Talk about more Zoom treatments,
well, not just, well, Zoom appointments. That's moving our heretofore inefficient care into a different venue, into a remote venue and such. There are different ways of actually taking care of populations. If you bring that model to it, then just accessing individual care, that you can build teams. Thresholds does something similar, where they'll have a physician and they'll have therapists and they'll have programs where they actually can take care of more people than just adding up each individual provider's caseload.
Threshold being a nonprofit group in the city. Alexa James, a lot of these candidates talk about reopening shuttered mental health clinics. First of all, how many folks did those mental health clinics serve, and say the city reopened some of them, what impact would that have?
Well, I think that the question really is like, do we have enough access? And I don't think the answer is just open more clinics. I think the answer is we have to look at a comprehensive intervention around how are we investing in community-based mental health services. We are in the biggest mental health crisis I hope we ever see in our lifetime. It's excruciating, and not everybody is going to connect to clinical-based care. So it's not like this only is the intervention. This is really about making sure that we have a workforce that wants to be doing this work, that the wages are livable, and that it's not on the backs of social service agencies that are already really over-delivering and running deficits.
And there certainly are a lot of social service agencies, and as you mentioned, always in need of funding. Dr. Robert Schulman, what does best practice look like? Is it the city running this and paying for this, or is it contracting with these social service agencies in the communities?
I don't know if there's one best answer, because every community is different, but I can tell you, you can open up all the clinics you want if you don't have the staff, the people to staff it, and the providers.
And clearly that's a big problem right now.
We don't have the workforce in order to do this, and so thinking about the delivery of care and the health of communities in a different way, I think, is really kind of what's needed. There's so much stigma attached to mental health anyways. There's serious mental health conditions, illnesses, and then there are more of the, I wouldn't say that they're less serious, but they sort of fall into a different bucket where people need temporary help in order to get through certain situations and such. And so there's a wide spectrum of patients who require, or people who require care, and that our job is to destigmatize in many ways and not think about these things as illness, but to think about think about wellness, and that there are issues with wellness that we can help people get returned to a state of better wellness. change the language, destigmatize, provide care in different venues, different types of care. So you take both the preventative approach, and so that you're not always reacting, right, to situations.
Right. As in with any kind of health care, physical health care, mental health care. Alexa James, your group has worked a lot with the Chicago Police Department. Of course, we've seen this rash of suicides, something like 7 in the last year. From your perspective, what's happening within the department? I
think what we're seeing everywhere, and you and I have talked about this before, that it's this like significant hopelessness. I mean, we can't sit here and diagnose like each individual person, but what we know is with every helping profession, we see this a lot right now with nurses too and social workers, that people are burnt out and they're experiencing high rates of vicarious trauma, and they don't know that there is something on the other side, and there's significant hopelessness. You also have to remember that this is compounded with significant financial strain and domestic issues. You know, every destabilizing factor in the last few years is really coming to a head, and we have to like understand this as the context and not polarize these issues and really come together and think, how do we comprehensively serve the city? And frankly, it's not just on the city. This is an issue that is affecting the entire country. We need everybody to really cost share here.
And there's, of course, at the national level, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Hotline. That's been up and running for about 6 months. Dr. Schulman, is that something that's making a dent here in this problem?
Not that I'm aware of, no. Unfortunately, I don't have the data to share with you or have looked at it. But
and it's probably a newer program. But I do want to ask you, Dr. Schulman, we talked about police officers. Are you seeing a suicide, higher incidence of suicide in the medical profession or first responders?
Yeah, we deal with this quite a bit in terms of our own staff. We deal with it with our medical students and residents. There's always there's a higher risk. This is a community that has higher rates of suicide than the general population. Certainly with first responders, it's huge. We have our program for veterans, post 9/11 veterans, where we understand how to treat it, and you can think of police and fire first responders in the same light, that in addition to the notion of burnout, there's something else. It's called moral injury. And I think that sense of moral injury, which is where you know what to do, but you can't. You're constrained because of situations outside of your control, and it's demoralizing, and it leads to, it's part of burnout, and it leads to frustration and potential.
A lot of things to think about as some of these candidates for mayor formulate their policies on this very important issue. Alexa James, Dr. Robert Schulman, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
And that's our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And of course, please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Weekend Review, and then live tomorrow night at 10 for Chicago Tonight. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe and warm, Brandis, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to be a multilingual law firm that provides translators for a variety of languages.
Have inspired me, just how genre bending they've been, epic, iconic collaborations.
These institutions sort of have an understanding that it's a new day.
I would have loved to seen groups that I grew up admiring in houses like these.
This is a genre of music that really shapes us as people.
Friday at 9 on WTTW.
What do you want, Nelson? One guess. victim is Susie Colebrook. I'm afraid she's been murdered.
Give me what you got.
All right, then. So, we have a bullet wound to the heart.
More holes in this coroner's report than Swiss cheese.
Murder cover-up at Briar Lane?